Hi, I'm Shar Pittman, and welcome to Woman of Purpose podcast. And I am really excited about this episode because today I have some friends, and yes, I do have friends. I've got 3 of them with me here today, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and then we're going to talk about a really, really important topic, I believe. We'll start with Miss Peggy right here.
Peggy, yeah. My name's Peggy Nunley, and thank you so much for having me. It's such a joy to be here, and I just love hanging out with you. I think we met around a year ago.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Must be 2 years now.
Is it 2?
It has to
no,
be
it's
2.
a year. It's
1?
really 1 year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It feels like eternity.
I know. It's what
just
happens.
you.
Yeah, it's just what happens. Yeah. So, and I'm the president of All Star Missions, and I just love Jesus. That's who I am.
That's who you are.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Inman, and I'm the founder of Dream Big Today Ministries, and I just met Shar for the first time, other than on a Zoom.
Zoom, yeah.
Zoom counts, though.
Yeah, Zoom does count.
I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you for being
From
here.
Skytook, Oklahoma, the big city.
Can't you tell by the accent? Just in case you didn't notice, they have an accent.
Accent?
Accent.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I have an accent. I'm from Minnesota
Minnesota.
originally. I have been with World Harvest for 5 or 6 years now, so it's been a while.
Seems like longer than that, but
25 years.
yeah. So it feels like forever.
I'm just honored to be here.
Yeah. I'm really glad you ladies could have, actually, we started off with Elizabeth and Peggy and I were going to do something, and then I was chatting with Elizabeth last night, and then we'll get into all that, but she's written a couple books that really just melted my heart, and so I was like, okay, we're going to throw Sarah in, and we're going to just shift everything, and so you guys are in on the shifting part of things. So kind of the topic, part of the topic we're going to talk about is like forgiveness, and your guys' thoughts on why is it important? Why is forgiving such an important thing in our lives? We'll start with you.
Oh, boy. Well, first of all, the Bible tells us that if we don't forgive, we won't be forgiven. So I think a lot depends on that. But it's also one of the biggest challenges we'll ever face. I know for myself, it's played out in a lot of different ways, all the way from being a little girl and, being disappointed and being hurt and having bad things happen to you, and then you have to forgive those people. And sometimes those people are the ones that are responsible for you, or they're members of your family, or people that you love that's in your inner circle. Those can be hard to forgive. Yeah. And then because you're little, your brain isn't functioning fully yet. You turn that on yourself, and all of a sudden you're the bad person. It's your fault. Yeah. Or a divorce happens, and you think that's your fault when it really had nothing to do with you at all. And then the next thing you know, you find yourself acting out as a teenager, making bad decisions, and you wind up pregnant like I did. And man, you just feel lost. You feel hopeless. You literally reach a place where you don't think you have any other decision to make except the one you end up making. And for me, that was abortion. And then there's a whole new long list of people on that forgiveness list. Yeah. And going through that list of people to forgive was one thing. Yeah. But then it really boiled down to forgiving myself. And that was the hardest one for me.
Elizabeth, what pushed you to that point to make a decision like that?
Well, again, having those things happen to me when I was a little girl lit a fire inside of me. I've heard so many stories of when things happen to little girls, they find themselves, curled up underneath their bed on their wedding night. I mean, for me, the opposite happened. It lit a fire underneath me and a curiosity. And so I just started looking for love in all the wrong places. I don't even like that term, but
They wrote a song about it.
they wrote a song about it. I definitely had the wrong definition of love. But if you stop and think about it, isn't that still the definition of love? I mean,
Yeah.
we sell toothpaste with sex appeal. We sell almost anything.
Yeah.
We sell cars with sex appeal.
Yeah.
Everything is based on that.
Right.
And so,
There's a misconception between love and sex.
yes.
How we can really just like tie it together, though.
Yes.
Just like, love equals sex, basically.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And in my case, my mother was very young when she had me. She got married at 15 and then had me at 16. And bless her heart, she did the very best she knew how to do. And even when she just had the first hint that I was going to be sexually active, she responded with an extreme anger to that, to stop it. Her intent was to stop it. So that cut off all communication with my mom. And so then when I was sexually active and then found myself pregnant, she was the last person I believed. Now that was a lie that I believed I could turn to. And so I literally had nobody to turn to. I'm pregnant and I feel as though I'm alone. And I'm here to tell you that's one of the strongest tools the enemy will use is isolation. If he can isolate you, he can destroy you.
Yeah.
And he almost did me because I absolutely felt like I was alone. So I turned to a friend, and lo and behold, that friend had just the summer before gone through an abortion herself.
Wow.
So she just said, well, I'll get my mom to help like she helped me. And they loaded me up in a car and drove me 2 hours to the clinic they went to, dropped me off on the front porch, and I went in alone, and I faced all of that alone, and I had the abortion. And it was scary. And I felt alone from then on until I turned to Jesus. I felt alone from that point forward. In fact, the name of my first book is Shh, Don't Tell. Because it's not a topic. I don't care what's in the news. I don't care how many bills they have before Congress. I don't care how many women there are finally that's reaching out on both sides of the track. The numbers are, we still don't talk about it.
Yeah.
We still don't talk about it.
Really talk about it.
Really
You talk
about
you talk about the bills. You talk
Yes.
about the things. You talk about my right, my body. All you can talk like
Yes.
that, but
Yes.
you don't really talk about it.
That's right. That's
like
right.
what it really does to you.
That's right.
You just talk about the surface stuff, and that you have the right to, and all of those things.
Exactly.
But you don't really talk about it.
Yeah. And for sure, I mean, when's the last time any of you in any kind of media setting have heard the word forgiveness associated with abortion?
Yeah.
When is that discussed?
Yeah. No.
And it's huge
Yeah.
in the abortion arena,
Yeah.
forgiveness.
Yeah. So busy fighting for an agenda that we don't understand what's attached to the agenda. It's a real life, it's real people, and it affects in ways that, I've never been through it, but it affects in ways that the two of you have been through it. And so the ways that it affects you mentally, emotionally, physically. So
I think I always say the biggest lie the devil ever told me was that I'm the only one. Don't tell anyone. Nobody will get it. They'll judge you. They'll shame you. You're the only one. So don't tell.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah.
For real. And it does. It keeps you in isolation. It keeps you in hopelessness. And it keeps you from even knowing that you should forgive or how to forgive.
For decades, I was the
Yeah.
only one outside of the friend that told me I was the only one. For decades, she and I were the only two that I knew
Yeah.
that had had the abortion.
I didn't know any that I knew of. I'm sure there's there's many, but as far as I knew, I was the only one that I knew, and I would never tell anybody until I told everybody.
You know, Sarah, when it come time to write my first book, at that time the statistics, and then just recently I've looked at statistics, and of course depending on where you look and what article you look, but statistics are anywhere from 1 in 3, 4 out of 10. I've even seen statistics of 2 out of 3 women now
Yeah.
have had an abortion.
That's so awful. It's because you feel like in that moment, I really do think you feel so hopeless. I remember when New York, talking about the agenda, I remember when New York was passing the like partial birth abortion law and everybody was up in arms. The church in general was up in arms, which rightfully so. I mean, I don't think we have an argument there. But, and I remember all church after church, everybody was praying, and these people were coming out and speaking, and they were praying for the babies and praying for the babies. And my heart was aching for the women. And I was just like, what about the women? Like, these women who have almost a full, or actually a full-term baby, who feel so lost or so hopeless or so stuck that they would go. I mean, I've had 5 full-term pregnancies, and by the time you're at the end, you have a bond with that child. I mean, that has got to be a really dark place to be, to go in. But anyways, I think, you know, for me it was like, those women, Lord, let's help those women to get help, to see that they don't have to make that call, or after they make that call, they for sure need help.
For sure. And, you know, when I wrote my first book, a friend decided that a lot of people needed that book. And he had a gathering. There's about 40 people there, and I didn't know he'd pre-ordered my book and passed them out to everybody. And so I was surprised, and it was a wonderful compliment. And he was a small man, came up to me, and he told me he was 76 years old, and he had very, very thick glasses on, and with tears in his eyes, even as he started to speak to me, introduced himself, told me that he was 76, and he said, "Little miss, I just want you to know I'm legally blind." And he said, "It's been 15 years since I've read a book with my own eyes, because I just can't see, but when your friend told me what the topic of this book was, he said, I got my magnifying glass," and he said, "and I read your book from front cover to back cover." And he said, "I can't tell you why your book impacted me the way it did, but I will tell you this. I will say the prayer that's in the back of your book every day from now until the day I die." And that impacted me, because when I made the decision to write that book, I didn't want to write it, but I told the Lord that if I could help one woman, or if I could keep one baby alive, never even thinking about the men that are impacted. And then when I decided to write the second book and make it a workbook for healing, and to make that book for all genders, all people impacted, whether they're hospital workers, clinic workers, the men, the family members, I called my staff together and told them I was getting ready to write a book and what the topic was. And one of the ladies that worked for me was in her 70s. She burst into tears, and I thought, because I'd heard the statistics, I thought, maybe she's had an abortion. Yeah. But she started crying, and she said, "I've lived with the guilt of paying for my granddaughter's abortion all these years," and she had never told anybody that she had paid for her granddaughter's abortion. And so we went through some healing right there. And, just me announcing that I was going to write the second book, and the family members. I mean, so yes, the women, yes, the babies, but it's so far reaching, and it's a lifetime reach, but God. And they can look me in the eyes all day long and tell me there's no impact. And with all of the love in my heart, the more they protest it, quite frankly, the more I love them, because the more I know their pain. And there's no argument in me. I mean, they can say what they want to say. Eve was deceived. Eve wasn't deceived. Adam was deceived. You know what I'm saying? She was convinced to eat the fruit, and she lived in the Garden of Eden. And women are convinced to kill a baby. I was convinced that I had no other choice. And then when I went in, there was still an opportunity to change my mind. I sat at the desk and I said, will this hurt my baby? And that woman looked right at me and said, oh, there is no baby. This is just like, have you ever been on a farm? She said, well, I was raised on a farm. I raised chickens. I hatched eggs. And she said, oh, it's just like a chicken egg that's just been fertilized. It looks just like that. And I said, oh, I mean, I'm young. I wanted to believe what she was telling me. Deep inside, I mean, I'm many decades past that day now. I can look back and probably know that I was justifying my actions. But at the time, I convinced myself I believed that. But I can tell you this, if that had a sonogram to play for me, for this old gal, there wouldn't have been an abortion. But mine was many, many years ago, and we didn't have that kind of technology. There wasn't even sonograms at that time. So, man, bring on those pictures.
That's so interesting because we're talking about forgiveness, and you mentioned the lady who dropped her, or she paid for her granddaughter, and that was something that I had to ultimately, eventually, God revealed to me, is like, you actually have to forgive your friend who brought you. And I didn't even know that I was harboring unforgiveness. I know that she was doing this as an act of love. Like, she really felt like this was what was best for me.
Sure.
And she didn't know any different, I guess.
Yeah.
But as you're talking now, I'm moved because the people who worked at the clinic, you know, in the state of Minnesota, 12 weeks pregnant is the cutoff. And I was 12 weeks and 4 days, I was almost 13 weeks. And they said, oh, we'll just fudge the numbers. And they really did make it easy, and they made a way for me to do this. And then, you know, years later, I go and I look, and I having a pregnancy, and I'm seeing what a 13-week-old baby, you know, in utero looks like, and what they can do, and they can suck their thumb, and they're like learning all these things. But as you're speaking, I'm thinking, I need to forgive that woman.
Oh.
I need to forgive those people in the clinic, because I mean, clearly I haven't.
Oh, yes.
But she's not I hope she's not a monster. She's a person.
Yes.
And I think she truly believes that what she's doing is right, but hopefully she gets a wake-up call to that, because it's unusual how or it's crazy how easy it was, really.
Yeah. I think about how I feel with one. The statistics also are that once you've had one, 66% of those women will have a second or more.
Yeah.
And so
That's
I
high
think
statistics.
and the statistics are
It's a
staggering.
high percentage, yeah.
So I think about how I have lived my life knowing I killed one child. And I think about those workers that work in those clinics. I think about the doctors, the nurses, even that woman who did my intake that told me it was like a chicken egg. And I have a hard time putting myself in their position. And once again, my heart goes out to them. I can't even fathom what it takes to cope. Mm-hmm. What they have to do to get to that place that they can forgive themselves, that they can seek forgiveness. I mean, but God, and I guess that's the reason why we go public, huh? I mean, the don't tell is the only reason I chose to speak.
Yeah. You know, they say that when something is kept in the dark, it has power over you.
Yes.
But the minute that you shed light on it, the minute that you release it, the minute that you say something, there's no power. It doesn't have that power over you anymore.
That's right.
And I think that is the important thing. You know, you guys are talking about isolation. You're talking about how when you go and you do that, I mean, we're talking about abortion here, but it could be anything. You know, it can be an affair. It can be, stealing something. It could be doing something, whatever, that brings you to a place of isolation, not like from people, but right here in your mind.
That's right.
Because you get in your head, and when you get in your head and you have no place to do that, I mean, what happened to you after the abortion? I mean, did it cause you to just become more promiscuous? Did it cause you to to push all those things aside? Like, we think of isolation as in like pulling away, but it's like, it is pulling away, but what you're doing is like not acknowledging. You're trying everything in your power to do what you need to do so that you don't have to deal with what you just did.
Yes.
And then it puts you in a place, in a reality that's not really reality.
Yes.
And so then you start living in a world that's like pretend, because you're not dealing with the elephant in the room. And then you put that on top of life happens. Like, you don't really stay stuck in that situation, because you get a job, you move on, you get married and whatever. And then you got this thing that is in your head, that isolation and that darkness, and that what it does to you mentally, what it does to you emotionally, how it keeps you from actually enjoying life, enjoying what's in front of you, and the guilt, that we carry when we don't actually, like, writing those books must have been so much more healing for you.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Because you're healing. What we don't understand when we go through any kind of trauma, anything like that, it doesn't matter what it is, we don't understand that when we actually give it light and put a spotlight on it, my healing then becomes somebody else's healing.
Yes.
And that's why there is a devil, there is an enemy that wants to keep us. If you tell, what are they going to think about you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that one of the things that were said to you guys?
Definitely.
What are they going to think about you? That's any of us that have been brought up in, maybe we were a drug addict or an alcoholic, or, whatever we did. It's like if we share that, it's like the shame and the guilt. What are people going to think? What are they going to say? How are they going to react? Anybody, shh, then just don't tell.
Yes.
And then that keeps you in a prison. There's so many women that are in a personal prison, that they're trapped. They do feel hopeless. They feel like they can't, I can't tell anybody. So you do live almost a double life. You live a life in here, and you live a life out here. And so then when you're alone and you're in those places, like going to bed at night or whatever, you get those voices. If they knew what you did.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. Literally sitting in church, when I made the decision to go back to church, I would sit there and I'd look around the church, and I thought, if they knew what I've done, they'd kick me out. And the truth is mixed. The truth is that chances are they wouldn't. And yet the truth is some of the religious people would have. I mean, that's the truth. Would they have physically kicked me out in today's age? Probably not, but in their minds there were some that would. Thankfully, I do, with all of my heart, believe those are few and far between, and those are the ones that needed to be in church. Our church are our hospitals. Jesus himself said he didn't come for those that are well, he came for those that were sick. So I understand that, but the forgiveness piece of all of this is a process. Starts off, for me, it probably started off with the father, the process of forgiveness, of being abandoned. He did at least pay for mine. There's many that doesn't get that benefit. He sent the money. He didn't show up. I never heard from him again. When I called and told him, because we had just broken up 2 weeks before I found out I was pregnant. And when I called and told him, he said he'd just do what he did with the last one. First I'd known about that, but so forgiveness of the father, and then a series of, because it's a process, of not even knowing you're holding resentment, not knowing you're holding unforgiveness, not knowing, and the pain can be so great that you bury it anyway. So for me, my process really didn't start for many, many years. I buried it. And you said, what did my life look like afterwards? My life looked like that. So the friend and her mother that took me picked me back up and brought me to a town about 15 miles from my hometown, dropped me off at Walmart, and I had no transportation. And I couldn't call my mom, or I didn't think I could. Now, the truth is, my mama would have taken me in, loved me. I was still living at home, but she would have taken me in, loved me. She would have raised my baby with me. That I now, as an adult, know that is the truth. But as a teenager, I didn't believe that.
Right.
So I didn't believe I could call my mom. And so there'd been a much, much older man pursuing me. And he'd been pursuing me hard. And I called him. And for years, now in my religious circles, I don't like to use these terms anymore, but for years, I said that day I sold my soul.
When you called
Because
him?
I called him, and he come and picked me up, and I ended up marrying that man, and I stayed married to him for 18 years. And
Wow.
it was something.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Isn't that
that's
something?
what happened
That's
with
what
my
happened.
life. And it afforded me an opportunity to put on a mask of, I'm now married. We moved to a different state. I got a career. My next pregnancy was a surprise and a shock. And so I'm a mother, and every time I would see that beautiful baby's face, the same name as yours, every time I'd see that precious baby's face, I was reminded of the one I couldn't see. And I did know the gender. And postpartum depression hit me so hard, and was not able to have a natural childbirth that I so desired. So once again, I was deceived and believed that that was punishment for my sin. Wasn't in church. I had dropped out of church. So it was so easy for me to be deceived. Not being in the Word, not being around the Word, not hearing the Word. So I believe God was mad at me. So I believe that's why I had a C-section. Very, very difficult birth. And so, boy, it was tough. I had a rough year after the birth of my first son. And yet, one of the most glorious days of my entire life, I will never forget the birth of my first son, and had a visitation by the Holy Spirit and a prophetic word given to me that's written in his baby book of my first son. God never left me.
Yeah, isn't that
He
something?
never left me.
Yep.
He was always with me.
Yeah.
But forgiveness, so my forgiveness really didn't even start until after that marriage fell apart, and I was so deep into a pit of hell that I dug for myself and was working my way out and started the process of healing. And recently, I mean, I'm in my 60s, and recently went through another level of forgiveness over something related to my abortion. Just another level of forgiveness.
Yeah.
We hide things so deeply. And I think our loving Father, who knows us so intimately, is so caring and so loving and so gentle with us that as we continue to tell him, because I tell him every day I'm his, I am his, and I also tell him anything that's in there that's not of him has to come out. Please get it out. And he does, and I believe it's his timing. I believe it was his timing, and he knew when I was ready, because it was a hard one. The hardest one was forgiving myself, and that was sitting in church, looking around. They'll kick me out if they know. Accepted God's forgiveness pretty easily and pretty quickly, was back in the Word. You can't read the Word and not know that he throws our sins as far as the east is from the west, that he throws them into the sea of forgetfulness. He remembers our sins no more. I knew he forgave me, but I struggled forgiving myself. And even in forgiving myself, that was a process. One level of forgiving myself, and then only to find that, oh, there's another level of forgiving myself, and there's another area where I've not forgiven myself, and it impacts us. It impacts our daily life. It impacts our relationships, how we relate to one another, how we relate to the relationships we currently have, and letting go and trusting God in those areas.
Yeah.
And a new definition of forgiveness. A brand new God's definition of forgiveness.
Yep. Because forgiveness isn't a feeling. You know, it's not something that we feel, but forgiveness really helps our perception of situations and of other people. So if I don't forgive myself, then it'll be really easy for me to cast judgment on somebody else. You know what I mean? The power of forgiveness is that forgiveness, wouldn't you agree, Peggy, that forgiveness, because you've shared your story on here once, and when things are done to us, when we grow up in just dysfunction, when we grow up in, an alcoholic home or whatever it is, it's like that is normal. And then we learn how to act. We learn how to behave, to keep the peace, to whatever. But forgiveness will keep us in our own personal prison. It keeps our perception, the way that we perceive things, the way that we perceive situations, the way that we perceive people, the way we perceive ourselves. It keeps us in a prison, and it keeps us handcuffed to that situation.
Yeah.
So when I don't forgive, I am constantly reminded of the negative of that. Yeah. But when I forgive myself, when you forgive yourself, now it doesn't make what you did okay, but what it does do is it makes what you did, it now becomes a testimony. It now becomes freedom for somebody else. It now becomes so forgiveness, when I can forgive myself for something, it actually gives me permission to be free.
Yeah.
And then when I speak about that thing, when I share that thing, it no longer has power over me. Yeah. Now I have power over it. And then it becomes now a story to be able to be shared, that somebody can go, if they went through it, then I can go through it. Then I can forgive myself. There's so much power in that little word forgiveness that we don't talk about. You're talking about forgiving the person that drove you, forgiving the person at the front desk. You don't ever really think about those things. Forgiving our dads, forgiving, your dad committed suicide.
Yeah.
It's like forgiving him for committing suicide and blaming you for it.
Right.
Like how you handle things like that. We take it on ourselves, like we did something wrong, like we could have done something different. So then those things are put on us. You didn't, know the difference in an abortion. You talked about deception. I think a lot of us walk around in self-deception, that we really are deceived, or we don't want to know the truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't want to know it, because the Bible says that it is the truth that sets us free. And sometimes we become very comfortable in our state that we're in, the isolation that we're in our mind, the isolation that we're in because I don't want to let people in. And when we go through hard things and we go through situations, we're really good at keeping people right here.
Yeah.
Because if I let them in any closer, they're going to know who I really am. They're going to know, and they're, you know what I mean? They're not going to love me. They're not going to like me. They're going to think all of these things. And we live life then in a pit, and we can't truly enjoy what it is. We can't walk in purpose. We can do things and think that that's our purpose, but not truly being in our purpose because we're in a prison.
Yeah. When I think about unforgiveness, I think it distorts our belief system. It distorts our belief system about God. It distorts our belief system about ourselves. And that is the plan of the enemy, right? And I think that's why it's so powerful that the Lord said, if you can't forgive, right? So the one thing that we receive from the Father is forgiveness. And so then we hold that against others. We're saying that what He did for us was not enough for them. And it positions us in this place as though we are God with the judgment we put upon others. And so really when you do forgive, it's you humbling yourself before God. You know, and we don't always think that way. We feel the pain, but it distorts our view.
Yeah.
And so I think it's so important that as you think about, and maybe if you're watching and you're like, you know, I hear you all. You know, it's wonderful when you have stories that, man, you forgave your dad that committed suicide, or you were able to forgive yourself with an abortion. But probably there's a lot of women that might be watching that say, but I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know where to start. You know, I'm afraid to even look because it's so painful. And I think it's so important to know that God is not looking at you in the judgment that you look at yourself.
That's a good one.
That He's not looking at you with, you know, holding His eye thinking, I can't even look at you because of what you've done. In fact, you know, He's looking with compassion, with love on us, even in the place where we're judging others. He's looking at us saying, just if you would just give it to me, you can have the freedom. And I think it's also important to know, you know, Shar, you were saying that, you know, when you forgive, that it actually enables other people to walk in freedom. But sometimes we have to look at the way that we forgive ourselves as we have to fight for that. Yeah. We have to fight to forgive. I know for me that when I've walked through betrayal, when I've walked through, like my father, which was the height, right, of he takes his own life, he writes me a letter, he blames me. And how do I forgive that? How do I let go of that? You know, maybe you've been hurt in church, or you've had spiritual, you know, fathers or mothers in the faith that have hurt you, which I've walked through some of that. And man, it's so deep, it's so real. And it's not as simple as just saying, well, I forgive, right? Wouldn't it be wonderful if it was just that simple? Yeah. You know, something that I have a mentor that really challenged me when I was just kind of walking through just a dark season of having to forgive some people that had really said really hard things to me. Just gut-wrenching things. And I remember I wanted to forgive them, but I didn't know how. And I don't know how many women I've sat with and they're like, I want to, but I don't know how. And I would say, well, you just, you know, and I would say, well, serve them, you know, bless them, pray for them. You know, I would tell them these things, but honestly, I didn't get it until I got it, right? Until you're sitting in that seat and you're like, I really do want to forgive them, but there's a part of me that wants to hate them. Yeah. There's a part of me that wants to just pretend like they never existed. And the truth is that it's in those moments that you go to the Lord. So I began, based upon my mentor, she says, you need to make an enemy's prayer list. And I was like, what is that? Like, and that's what she said. And she says, I want you to take the name of every person, sit with the Holy Spirit, ask him, who has hurt you? Where does this wound start? Right? Because it's never with the last person. Yeah. It goes way back. Yeah. And as I began to write out names, I began to find that right now, and I say this a lot, the enemy starts when we're young to destroy the purpose of God when we're old. And so I have a calling on my life. Whoever's watching this, do you have a calling on your life? Because the Lord is calling you with purpose. And we know this, Ephesians 2:10, right? That He's created us for good works, that He's prepared before we were ever born. So there's a calling on every person's life. So the enemy starts when we're young. And so he builds upon this belief system in our life so that when we get in these moments where, you know, we are just at a crisis of faith, because actually you can't move on until you forgive.
That's the truth.
You can't move on in your ministry. You can't move on in other relationships. It will affect your marriage. It will affect your parenting. You know, it will affect your health. Yeah, it does. Like it literally, it never stays at unforgiveness. It moves to bitterness. It moves to anger. Yeah. And all of a sudden you may not even realize that you are passively, aggressively expressing that bitterness. I mean, if you sit with someone and you can sit with someone for 10 minutes and you know if they have unforgiveness in their life. because it'll come up all the time. And so I made this enemy's prayer list, and I began to, every day I would sit before the Lord and I would pray for these people on this list. And I'd still be mad at them. And I kept doing this until one day I watched this video of a minister that he was talking about how he began to forgive those that had really hurt him. And he said he would take the Lord's Supper before praying for them. And so I pulled out my enemy's prayer list, and I got me some juice and crackers, and I thought, oh, well, I'm just going to take the Lord's Supper. And of course, this is holy, right? It's communion. And of course, I want to be clean. I want to be right, and so I'm praying, Lord, search me, know me, forgive me. I'm going to take the Lord's Supper. And I took the Lord's Supper, and then I started trying to pray for my enemies. And you know what the Lord did? He says, He just reminded me of things that I didn't confess. And all of a sudden, as I'm trying to pray for them, I'm looking at them and I'm just like, God, I'm so sorry. I'm a worse sinner than them. And it so broke me. Because as you sit before the Lord, you really can't continue to hold unforgiveness toward those that have wounded you, because you begin to realize that withholding forgiveness toward them is really wounding this relationship of what God has done for you. And you realize you don't deserve the forgiveness that you've received. And there's something so significant that the Lord breaks in you, that when you realize this gift of grace that you receive from the Father, it enables you to let go. And so I did this for like 30 days straight. And I would weep like a baby every time. Until there came a point where I began not just praying, God, help me to forgive them. Then I began to pray, God, bless their ministries. God, bless their children. God, bless their finances. And then the Lord told me, I want you to write some checks. And He had me so into their lives and their families. And I'm writing checks, like big checks. And but it wasn't, I didn't write it resentfully. But it had moved me to this place of, I want to see them flourish and I want to see them free. And the more that I blessed them in prayer, the more free I got. And there is something significant about being able to bless your enemies. When you're able to do that, you can love them, because now that love is not your love. It's not. That forgiveness, it's not yours to withhold.
That's truth.
It's not yours. I can't forgive them. I'm only able to forgive to the degree that I receive forgiveness. And when I'm able to receive His forgiveness, then who am I to withhold it from someone else? And so forgiveness is so powerful. And if you will fight for forgiveness toward your enemy, what will happen is you will see walls break down in other relationships. And you will see not just a releasing with those that maybe have come against you, but it will begin to free others. Because as you, like Elizabeth, when you talk about when I was able to forgive myself, there's somebody watching that they walk in condemnation, they walk in shame, and they've never thought that they never considered that they betrayed themselves and they needed to forgive themselves. But just by you releasing that, someone else is able to, but you had to fight for that. You had, and that's the thing, sometimes we don't realize what we're fighting for, but it will release our children, because we will pass on the unforgiveness.
100%.
And it will hurt others. And of course, we're trying not to do that, and we think, well, we'll just hold it. And the truth is, you can't hold it.
No, it hurts ourselves more than it hurts anybody else. And because I'm hurting, then I release all of that hurt on everyone else. It affects the way that I treat people. It affects everything. And I love the way that you were talking about how it distorts our belief. it distorts the way that we think. This was I did a podcast a couple months ago, and it was about being stuck. And I don't know if you guys have ever read the book The Shack or seen the movie The Shack. Well, if you haven't, I recommend you watching it or reading the book, because it really, that was one of the books. I'm not like an avid reader. I don't like devour books, but I picked up that book and I literally could not put it down. I had so much healing when I read that book. And it's interesting because in there, the Lord took Mac back to the shack where he got stuck because he couldn't get over, because his daughter was killed and he couldn't get over that. He couldn't get over that. And the whole process of that, where he went back to the place of pain, went back to where he got stuck because he got stuck in the pain. And where he got stuck is that he couldn't forgive the person that hurt. Yeah. But then through that whole journey, the Father showed him that the person that hurt him, that God loved him. Yeah. And it was just like revealing kind of it's just like, God wasn't doing that to show you how terrible you were. What he was showing you was that the comparison is that they may have done something terrible, but they're still worth loving.
Right.
They're worth forgiving because God died for them. Yeah. The Father gave his Son for them too. Yeah. And it's a hard pill to swallow, but in him doing that, that's very powerful and very beautiful. Yeah. To not bring condemnation, but to just really bring like a perspective like, oh my gosh, it almost takes us into a place of humility where we really just want to just fall on our face and just say.
Yeah. And and one thing I realized, I made this enemy's prayer list, but what I discovered was they were not my enemies. They were victims of the enemy. Yeah, that's good. You see, and we forget that. People that hurt us, we live in a broken world. And because we live in a broken world, we're going to experience pain. We're going to experience offense. But when we can see that those people that we're so angry with, that they are not the enemy. The God of this age blinds people, right? Yeah. Blinds them from the hope of the gospel. And so they're walking in blindness. And I think sometimes it's easier when they're lost and they hurt you versus when, right, they're confessing Christian.
Friendly fire.
And they hurt you. Because then it's like, well, they know better. Yeah. Well, they know better. But the truth is, we still get blinded. We all have blind spots. And I think that's what the Lord was showing me with my enemy's prayer list, is that as the more that I began to get before him and he would expose my heart, is I could see, well, they're not they're a victim of the enemy too. Where I was victimized by the enemy, where the enemy blinded me, he has blinded them. And this is why I must forgive them. Right? So that there can be reconciliation, so that we can not hinder the gospel from going forth, because that is the truth. If the enemy can trap us in unforgiveness, then it actually stops the gospel from going forth. And so it means there will be people that will never come out of darkness because we have chosen to live in unforgiveness.
Yeah, it's just such a powerful and very needed understanding of the power of forgiveness. And especially when you've gone through this thing of abortion, it affects so many people. There's so many layers, and the importance of actually releasing forgiveness on all of those people, but especially on yourself, so that you can be healing for somebody else. We can't give what we don't have. And if I stay stuck and if I stay in a place that I am not forgiving myself, then it really does affect everything around us, So was there a lot of power in that when you had the abortion? Was there did it have a hold on you?
Oh, absolutely. So giving myself to that older gentleman and immediately getting married and immediately having a family, starting a career that skyrocketed, it fed an and ambition in it. And I took on a spirit of perfectionism. So that doesn't affect everybody that way, of course. But for me, that's what happened, is that I had failed in the worst way, and I set out to never fail again. And I put unreasonable expectations on myself. I was going to be the perfect wife. I was going to be the perfect mother. I was going to be the perfect career person, and I wasn't going to fail at any of that. Notice I didn't say perfect Christian. And so that's exactly what I set out to do. And by golly, that new marriage gave me, and moving to a new state, gave me the opportunity to put that mask on, and I wore it well for 17 of those 18 years. Got a wonderful career in the government, shot up the career ladder, had 2 beautiful kids together we had 2, he had 2. They come to live with us even. Anyway, so from all practical purposes on the outside looking in, we were just the perfect little family. And nobody knew because we don't tell. But it all came crashing down because it's unsustainable. It's not sustainable. So when you see them out there and they're protesting so loud and they're saying, oh, this doesn't impact me. Oh, no, I'm fine.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was 16, I had a friend who I had an abortion when I was 18, but when I was 16, I had a friend who, she was 17, and at that point she had had 4 abortions, and it had just become her form of birth control. And she wasn't a bad person, she was a kid, but she was so numb to, and I think, talking about deceit, I personally, and I know my friend when she was 17, we dehumanized those babies. They were not babies. And just like the chicken egg, it's just a cluster of cells. It's not actually a baby. It's not actually a person. And so you love to lie to yourself, or whether you're lying to yourself or the enemy's lying to you to keep you there, whatever it is, you welcome that deceit because it's comfortable. That keeps you like, okay, I'm not a monster because it was just a cluster of cells. Or, you had mentioned other things. When my husband and I were just dating, I cheated on him. He was in Iraq and I cheated on him, with the same person, but several times. I was having kind of a little separate life going on, and I was never going to tell him. And I lied to myself saying, it's okay because we're not married. And we weren't saved yet. But, so I didn't have necessarily, I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I lied to myself and was like, well, we're not married. We're just dating. And did we even say that we're exclusive? Probably not. And he will never have to know because he's in Iraq. Well, when we got saved, and the night before I was pregnant. We're going to get baptized the next day. And the Lord convicted my heart. And he was like, are you going to take this seriously? And so, and I said, yeah, I want to. And so I asked him to search my heart, and he kept bringing this up, and I was like, nope, can't do it. That we were just dating. It's okay. I don't ever have to tell him. He'll never have to know. Like, this doesn't affect him at all. We were not married, blah, blah, blah. And God was just like, actually, it's got power over you because it's in the dark. And so, super, like 7 months pregnant, going to my husband, telling him, confessing this to him, and then waiting for him to call me names and lash out and leave me and all the things. And he did none of those things because that's not who he is. But it brought freedom to myself and to our marriage that I didn't know we needed. Or even, I had been raped when I was 14, twice. But I was drinking both times. And so the lie was I wasn't actually raped. I was flirting with these guys and I was drinking. So really, I put myself in this situation, and I lived with that until I was talking to my husband about it after we had been married, and I told him, and he said, "Did you say no?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but then like just kept pushing and whatever." And he says, "Sarah, in the army," he was in the army. "In the army, if you say no one time, that's rape." And so that was a whole new thing. And then it was like, oh, so that was like, I need to forgive these guys for doing this. I mean, it's just so the levels of deceit, the layers of deceit that we are veiled with, or that we choose to be veiled with, is it keeps us from forgiving, but it keeps us from repenting. And that repentance is freeing. It really is. When you were talking, Peggy, that's it. Like, we often get caught stuck on someone else, but we have this deceit of, oh, I was just dating Mike, so it's okay. Or, I was just doing this. It was just a bundle of cells. It wasn't a person, and we choose to lie to ourselves. And if I'm being really honest with you, I probably didn't truly repent for, I said sorry. I was like, God, I know, I'm sorry that I had this abortion. I know this isn't what you want. And I knew I was raised in the church. I knew what God thought about abortion when I walked in that clinic. But if I'm being really honest, I didn't regret it. I would have done it again. Even after I apologized to God over and over the years, because I kept saying I was 18. I already had 2 kids at 18. And I got pregnant from a one-night stand because, like you, I was like, well, I had been raped, and then it was, this is what I'm good for, so this is what I'm going to do. And I spent my life from that point on trying to do that, and got pregnant again and again. And then 18 years old, I have a 2-year-old and a newborn, and I meet a guy, one night stand, and I'm pregnant again. And I genuinely excused it over and over and over, told myself it's a bundle of cells. I didn't have any other option. I had other options, but I told myself these things, and I kept myself in deceit. And then finally one day the Lord was like, let's really talk about this. Let's really think about this. And I did. And I realized I actually did have other options. I really could have given that child up for adoption. Yeah. But if I'm being honest, I was selfish, and I knew I could do that. But I was like, I know I'll love the baby too much. Yeah. By the time I give birth, I'll love that baby, and I won't want to give it up. And I can't raise 3 kids when I'm 18. Yeah. But somehow I managed. I mean, there was options. So it was coming to a place of actual repentance, like really getting honest with yourself and honest with the Lord, and being willing to say and believing it. If I was faced with that, if I could go back, I wouldn't have done it, but, and I'm grateful for what the Lord has done, and He's done amazing things, and this is being used for His glory, and that's wonderful. But I think we have to really allow ourselves to to really get to the truth and not be afraid of it. The truth is hard. It's you have to fight for it. It's work. It's ugly sometimes, but it's so important. And I was thinking when you were talking, I was thinking about when Jesus said to the paralyzed man who was lowered through the roof by his friends, and Jesus looked at him. He didn't say, "You're healed." He said, "Son, your sins are forgiven you." And he perceived the Pharisees' thoughts of, who is this that forgives sins? We have been given the power to forgive sins, to forgive your sin against me. I can forgive you. I mean, good. That's powerful.
That's good.
That is like, we don't put enough weight on the power that's behind that. Mm-hmm. It's so powerful that it offended the religious leaders. Mm-hmm. They thought, who can you? Only God can forgive sins. Mm-hmm. But I'm in Christ Jesus, and He's in me. Yeah. And so we have been given the authority to forgive sins against us. Yeah. And so
that's good.
What an honor.
Yeah.
Really.
Mm-hmm. So what is life like from having an abortion and bringing things to the light, going through the steps in the process of forgiveness. What is it like from that point over here when you lived the perfectionism and all the things that you did? You were going to just do the thing. And then when you hit that wall and say, I can't do the thing, I've got to deal with this thing, right? It's like that thing, whatever that thing is for you, it was this abortion, that thing. What is life like now when you've done what the Bible talks about? The forgiveness is the key that unlocks the prison door for us to be able to walk out and experience what life really has for us. So what is that like for you?
Well, it's peace. Always when I'm asked, it's peace. It's so much more now that I've got a couple of decades under my belt, finally. But it's always been that I never, ever, ever want to give up the peace, because I was so tormented. And of course, one sin leads to another sin, one deception leads to another deception, one justification leads to another justification. So it was one of many, many. As I said, I had dug a pit of hell so deep.
Yeah.
So there was many things. The abortion will always rank at the top of and that's what we're talking about today. So there's other things, but so I was just at such a state that I couldn't walk into a room and not have noise. I had to have music playing, and of course I'm not living for the Lord, so it's it's secular music. Television blaring. I could not be still. I couldn't stand the silence. And so I was a workaholic, working many hours, and I was just tormented. I just was tormented. And I can't really say I know there were voices, because there was always the temptations to make bad decisions. My bad decisions got better because I was highly successful in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
So I didn't take all the bad paths I could have taken.
Sure.
I didn't drink. I never did drugs. I could have. I numbed my pain through the ambition and recognition and people pleasing, and that's how I numbed my pain.
Yeah.
I mean, James tells us if we're guilty of one sin, we're guilty of all anyway. So it's the peace.
Yeah.
I mean, when I finally stepped into that forgiveness, the fullness of I am forgiven, and then I had to walk through the forgiveness of myself, because it didn't stop with just the knowledge of God's forgiveness. It had to be my forgiveness. The peace came. I had peace, but the fullness of that peace didn't come until I really experienced God's love. God's love is what really sealed it for me.
Regardless of what you did, that He loved you.
And He loved me on that
He does
table,
love you on that table.
as the abortion was happening.
Wow.
He loved my little girl as she flew into His arms.
Wow.
He loved that man that handed over those $100 bills to me, or had them handed over to me.
Yeah.
His love is, we cannot comprehend. But I'm going to spend my last breath attempting to understand His love. And then with everything in me, I want to give out that love that I so desperately needed. And that I so desperately was searching for. And I know I have to continually be filled up with it. And when all of those other things happen, when I'm offended, when I'm hurt, when I'm anxious, when I'm worried, when everything that's the opposite of faith happens. I know there's a lacking in me, and it's a lacking of his love, because when I'm full of his love, perfect love casts out fear. Love covers a multitude of sins. I know I got to go back to the love tank. I've got to go back to his love and let him fill me full again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I still don't want to talk about my abortion. I don't want to wave my books around for anybody to see. I don't care if anybody buys a book.
Yeah.
I give more of them away by far than I've sold any of them.
Yeah.
It's not about that.
Yeah.
But man, it's nice to be free.
Yeah.
And
And the thing is, though, like we said earlier, your freedom, because of your healing, becomes somebody else's freedom and
That's
somebody
right.
else's healing. So those books it was your healing, so that it can get in the hands of somebody else, so that they can get healed.
yeah.
I remember you saying last night, you were sharing a story with me last night, and you said that you had shared, I believe it was that you had shared your testimony or something, and this little 82-year-old lady,
Yes.
82 years old, walks up to you and whispers in your ear and says that you will be the only one, you and I will be the only one
Yes.
that knows
Yes.
that I had an abortion.
Yes.
But what freedom for her,
Yes.
from 82 until the Lord took her, till she went home,
Yes.
that she could live in peace and freedom for that short time. And so the torment, she didn't have to live with that torment anymore.
Yes. Yes.
Because you were willing to share something that you didn't want to share anymore, but you shared it, and that
Yes.
little old lady could die in peace.
Yes. And and it's in those moments that, as much as my flesh may not want to talk about it, man, in those moments, I'll shout it from the mountaintops if it helps one more like that. Or that 76-year-old man that promised that he was going to say that prayer.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the moments that I live for.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have a book like this I could pick up and walk through my healing and journal through what I needed to do to heal or needed to do to forgive. I didn't have, a Sarah that I could, hold hands and cry with and, and we're not alone. And there are more that's opening up and speaking about it. There's still the majority that don't.
Yeah.
But there are more, and the more of us that will be brave to do this, the more we'll be brave to do this. And the more that we talk about our freedom and how free it is. I mean, I talked about my peace, but my peace blossomed with the freedom to speak as well. The peace grew.
Yeah.
Because when you're free enough to speak, you are free indeed.
Amen.
Overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony.
That's exactly right. And when we still are not able to speak, then search my heart, O Lord. And what else is there? And I'm not saying that necessarily there's things left that needs to be dealt with, but I'm saying that's a good indication there may be things left that needs to be dealt with. Because once we're free, I had to go talk to family members. I had to go talk to my children before I wrote my book.
Yeah.
They didn't know.
Yeah.
They didn't know. I had to talk to them first. So there's reasons why people don't talk freely, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But just because they make a decision not to talk freely doesn't mean they're not willing to talk freely.
Right.
They would be willing, but there's reasons not to. And there's a difference there. And I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
Because I support those that if it's going to hurt somebody, if it would cause conflict, if it would cause chaos, then we always follow what the Holy Spirit's telling us to do. I'm talking about those that still have that reluctance, that then that's the time to just allow God to check. Just allow God to do another
Even if it's one
scan.
person, maybe you just need to find that one person where you're like, I
82-year-old.
just need to, I need to tell one person
Yes.
so that I can it's not in the dark anymore, and I can
Yes.
just be at peace.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
So will you share, Elizabeth, your books, please? I think it's really important. And then we're also going to put a link here so that they can get it and purchase it online.
Okay.
So
Sure. The first one is Shh, Don't Tell. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on my website, dreambigtoday.org. This one, it was just my first book. I don't know what else to say about it. It was just my first book, but it was written from a woman's perspective to women, and then I found out that men were reading it. And so then I had a good friend, a mutual friend of Peggy and I, that really encouraged me to do a workbook for healing. And this workbook, I believe anybody could take this workbook and work through. And it doesn't have to be abortion. The topic of this is abortion, but forgiveness is forgiveness, and healing is healing. So even if you're suffering from something else, just change the topic. God's forgiveness is priceless. It would help you walk through the journey. And I purposely put, because I was told it was like a chicken egg, and you believed it was just a bunch of cells, I purposely put pictures of a 12-week embryo on the cover of both of my books, because it was at 12 weeks that I made my decision to abort my baby, and they're definitely a baby at 12 weeks. So this one's loved because he definitely loved me all the way through all of my bad decisions. He never stopped loving me. And Peggy gave some wonderful ideas about tools you could use to walk through forgiveness. But I'm going to tell you, it's as simple as when you are at that place that you don't know how to forgive that person, you just cry out to God and tell him that. That is such a good first step for you, to simply set wherever you're alone, wherever you feel the closest to God, and you just cry out to him and tell him, I don't know what it looks like or feels like to forgive that person. I don't know what that is like, and I give it all to you. That's your first step towards forgiveness. And then ask him, you show me, you walk me through it, and I promise you that will start that process for you. Now, she gave you some steps that'll work wonderfully as well, just whichever one resonates with you. But start that process today, that forgiveness process. The freedom for you of forgiveness is priceless, priceless. And Jesus died on that cross to give you that freedom. Thank you for giving us this opportunity.
yeah, this was really good. It was really, really good. So healing and peace starts with forgiveness. There's no other way around it. If you're looking for peace, if you're looking to be healed, it really is to search your heart and forgive. And I believe that the number one forgiveness really has to start with forgiving ourselves first. You know, and I loved how you said that, Elizabeth, how in everything that we've done in our life, doesn't matter what it is that we've done, that God has never not loved us. Yes. He's always loved us. Our bad behavior, things that we've done, doesn't affect God's love for us. Mm-hmm. It might affect my relationship with him, but it does not affect his love for me. Yeah. And so I want to encourage you, anybody out there watching, that if you need healing, that you start with forgiveness. And I believe that you will see peace, and you'll see love, and you'll see healing in your life like you've never seen before. So I just want to thank you, ladies, for being with us this morning, or this afternoon now. Thanks for coming all the way from Oklahoma. Wow. I told them that it was warm here and it's 50 degrees, and they're like, 50 degrees and warm doesn't go together. But anyways, I really appreciate you guys being here, and I'm really excited about what this is going to do. I believe that people are going to really receive some healing and receive and feel, like you said, Elizabeth, that it wasn't until you felt that you knew that the Father God loved you and you were overwhelmed by his love, that things started really changing. And I think somebody out there needs to hear that God loves you. He's not mad at you, and there is freedom and there is forgiveness for anyone that wants it. So thank you for joining us on this episode of Woman of Purpose, and I'm supposed to read through this list here. So check us out on Woman of Purpose on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. And then our email is womanofpurpose.net. No, contact at womanofpurpose.net. All right, well, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.